Your sweet, sweet lips, your perfect nose, your rosy cheeks, your 10 little toes, your precious little pee-pee, your wondrous size, your tender bottom, your pink chubby thighs.
We've waited so long for you to come. I'm your dad,
And I am your mom,
and we can see it's perfectly true. You're perfectly, perfectly you.
Welcome to BEPE Presents. Birth and Early Parenting Educators is an alliance of professionals interested in and focused on the first period of human development from conception to birth and breastfeeding. This is a dramatically important aspect of human development, perhaps the most important time for human beings in their development. And this is because we've learned recently that the baby in the womb is extraordinarily sensitive and vulnerable and open and communicative as we were never able to know before. And we want to get the message of these new discoveries out to parents so they can benefit from them as soon as possible. This program you're about to see is one in a series of programs that we've prepared for you, which we hope will be very fascinating and illuminates this period of human development.
You're perfectly, perfectly you.
James W. Prescott, Ph.D., is a developmental neuropsychologist and cross-cultural psychologist. Jim has devoted his professional life to the study of peaceful and violent behaviors, focusing specifically on the impact of early mother-infant nurturing and its lifelong impact on the developing brain. He was formerly health science administrator at the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development in Washington, D.C.
How does a society take an innocent newborn and place that newborn on a life path that's characterized by peace and happiness and love and harmony, or the opposite? Depression, alienation, anger, rage, violence. What we have learned over the years, and I've devoted most of my professional life to this, is examining the roots of this in the mother-infant relationship. That the mother-infant relationship is the beginning relationship of all other human relationships and relationship to society and to the planet itself. And there's been an enormous amount of research that's been conducted over the past quarter of a century that shows and is documented that the failure of mother love, of affectional bonding in the mother-infant relationship, does induce developmental brain abnormalities, both structurally and functionally. And it's these brain abnormalities that underlie the depression, the alienation, the anger, the rage, the violence. And I think we can all recognize that a child who has been abused, neglected, who's depressed, who's alienated, who's filled with anger and rage, and is violent, the damage has already been done. So what I want to try to focus on and highlight very briefly is that kind of damage that is done, the sensory systems that we know are involved, and what we can do for prevention. So when I joined the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development back in the 60s, no one had raised the question of trying to understand these behavioral pathologies in terms of abnormal brain processes. It was all social, psychological evaluations, assessment. But it's very, very clear that sensory stimulation is absolutely essential for normal brain growth and development, and particularly as it involves the intimate physical affectional relationship that Mother Nature has provided in the mother-infant relationship. Unless we pay attention to those very first earlier stages of development, the newborn infant-mother relationship, and to assure the normal development of the brain, we're going to have enormous difficulty because, again, the damage has already been done. What we have discovered in a variety of studies is that there's a certain brain neurotransmitter called serotonin, brain serotonin, which we know when deficit of brain serotonin exists is associated with depression, impulse discontrol, and pathological violence. And I initiated some of those earlier studies with the animals, the mother-deprived animals, but that relationship is very well established with adult human violent individuals, both homicidal and suicidal. So there's no question about that relationship. Human breast milk contains an enormous amount of nutrients and biochemical factors not present in formula milk. One of the critical elements is tryptophan, which is an amino acid, a precursor amino acid essential for the development of brain serotonin. So when the newborn infant is not breastfed, the brain is deprived of that critical nutrient that makes the normal development of the brain serotonin system possible. So we have now two independent, quote, independent sources that influence the developing brain that we know results in alterations and abnormalities that are linked to later depression, impulse, discontrol, and violence. So one of the priorities that our society, any human society, must have if we're going to begin this reconstruction is to support women as nurtured mothers. And we have not been doing that, particularly with respect to breastfeeding. And the World Health Organization has recommended 2 years and beyond for breastfeeding. What you find is a bonding and an intimacy that develops, which involves all the sensory systems, touch and movement and smell. And when you encode that developing brain over a 2-year period or longer, I will guarantee you, you will have a child who will develop to be happy and can relate intimately with women and not in an exploitive or violent manner. Now, I do want to point out that when I talk about the failure of mother love, by no means am I laying the blame on mother. It's really society that has failed to recognize the importance of woman as nurturing mother. And we see that in our national policies of daycare. We're now pushing welfare mothers with infants into institutional daycare, where they cannot bond with their mother, and they're certainly not going to bond with the daycare operators. And if you don't have that first basic bonded relationship, these children are growing up not able to bond with anyone. And so we have the foundation for the sociopaths, the psychopaths, and this increasing phenomenon that we're seeing of children killing children, you know, without remorse, without compassion, without empathy. And what you're going to see on the videotape is probably the most important study in the primate literature on mother-infant separation. It was conducted by Dr. Bill Mason and Gersh Berkson, in which they reared infant monkeys separated from the mother at birth in a cage by themselves, but in a colony room where they could see, hear, and smell other monkeys and have social communication based upon no sensory modalities. But they had no body contact, no touch, no movement, except what Dr. Mason and Berkson did is that in one of the experimental conditions, which was the experimental condition, they had this artificial surrogate mother move. The other one was bolted to the floor, which did not move. That one difference of body movement made all the difference in the world. It prevented all the social-emotional, virtually all the social-emotional pathologies that resulted from mother-infant separation. So we have now know what really is most critically important in the mother-infant relationship. I think that's probably a good introduction to the film material, which I'd now like to show you so that you can see really the power of the sensory environment and shaping the future behavior of not only human primates, but essentially all mammals, because this is a mammalian universal. And I just simply want to point out that there's no mammal on this planet that separates the newborn from its mother at birth, except the human mammal. There's no mammal on this planet that denies the breast of the mother to the newborn except the human primate.
Scientists have long told us that by the time children reach this age, 7, 5, even younger, they are largely formed. Abilities and temperament that will serve a lifetime are almost set. But what happens in the early years that has so irreversible an effect? What are the ingredients of the mysterious mix, powerful enough to shape a person while it is still an infant? There is something universal in this intimate, sensuous, sometimes fiery first relationship that we recognize as mothering. From its mother, a child gets its first experiences of the world, the first stimulation of its senses: touch, smell, sight, taste, and hearing. With its mother, a child experiences its first social interchange and its first emotions. Investigators of human behavior are examining all these experiences and their interrelationships to determine what part each plays in a child's development. Can we discover the crucial factors in the rich and various stimulation a mother gives her young? Or is mothering so complex that it will resist analysis? Investigations of the relationship between mother and child proceed at all levels among humans and other mammals. In recent years, these studies of the behavior of lower animals have provided a new angle from which to observe the nature of humans. Most animals die if they are abandoned by their mothers. Motherless human infants usually receive some care. But the powerful effect of mothering upon the young can be appreciated more clearly when it is absent. Some of these children at Löhe House Institution in Munich have suffered brain damage. Some are mentally retarded. All have suffered the effects of disrupted maternal-infant relationship. The effects of early separation from their mothers upon children were noted in scientific publications some 25 years ago, when psychiatrist René Spitz observed a high frequency of retarded development among institutionalized children. The English psychiatrist John Bowlby created controversy in 1944 with his conclusion that early separation leads to a character disorder marked by a lack of affection or feelings for anyone. These depressed children might be found in institutions around the world. They are withdrawn. Their pace of development has slowed. They are listless, vacant, unnaturally passive. They have few emotional contacts or relations with others, little spontaneity, no laughter, no tears. To go back to the beginning of the relationship between a mother and child, an infant's first human contact is likely to be at the breast of its mother. Here, it is closely held and probably rocked as it receives its first food, and a rich mixture of sensory stimulation, body warmth, touch, taste, smell, the sight of the mother's breast, and the calming of its urgent pangs of hunger. Our animal nature is an endowment we share with other creatures of the earth. If it is valid to compare human and lower animal behavior, the common experience of mammals, breastfeeding, may yield insights into the development of both. Psychologist Harry Harlow at the University of Wisconsin, has long studied the importance of early experience to infant monkeys. Some time ago, he initiated groundbreaking experiments dealing with the relative importance of hunger and the sense of touch to young monkeys. In this film record of a Harlow experiment in 1958, a helpless infant monkey shows a simple reflex behavior, moving its head when it is touched. This reflex enables the infant to find the nipple of its mother's breast, but the experimental monkeys never saw their mothers. From birth, the monkeys were fed from bottles. Dr. Harlow then gave several infant monkeys these substitute mothers, a substitute of wire, another covered with cloth. Whether the cloth dummy or the wire dummy held bottles of milk, the monkeys preferred their cloth-covered mother substitutes at all times. In a large cage, with many objects to choose from, the young monkeys chose to cling to the contact comfort of their cloth-covered mothers. The isolated monkeys would spend as much as 15 hours a day clinging to their cloth mothers. And this attachment persisted after a separation as long as 2 years. When the monkeys were frightened, they ran to their cloth mother. When the cloth mother was removed, the monkeys showed signs of extreme disturbance. But they were calmed and comforted when the mother was returned. The wire substitute, even when it held a bottle, excited no affection in the monkeys. The apparent apathy of this animal and its rocking behavior became an important focus of later studies. Today, Dr. Harlow is still investigating the depression that follows the separation of young monkeys from their mothers. Dr. Harlow says that his work began as a mishap. He was raising single monkeys in separate cages when John Bowlby suggested that he was really raising a laboratory of abnormal monkeys. At that point, Dr. Harlow began to study the abnormalities. At the Hazleton Laboratories in Falls Church, Virginia, these normal monkeys are being studied and filmed by Dr. James Prescott of the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. Active, curious, and alert, these healthy monkeys have been raised by their mothers. When they are put together in a cage, they react to each other with interest. They are at ease with each other. They play and touch each other freely. When Dr. Prescott separates the monkeys, they resist, holding each other tightly. They maintain body contact and cling to each other even through the wire mesh of their cages. Monkeys raised in isolation behave quite differently. These monkeys were removed from their mothers at birth. They were hand-fed in incubators. They were raised in cages through which they could see, hear, and smell other monkeys, but could not touch or be touched by them. When they are put together, there is no play between them. They seem indifferent to touch. Or they react as though touch is unpleasant and move away from each other. When they are held, the isolation-reared monkeys show signs of great stress, screeching and baring their teeth. The stereotype movements of rocking backwards and forwards over and over again are typical of animals deprived of normal mothering. It is as though the animals attempt to give themselves the touch and motion stimuli they were denied in infancy. Dr. Prescott has theorized that this abnormal behavior in isolation-reared monkeys is a sign of abnormal functioning of the cerebellum, a brain structure associated with body movement. Similar behaviors in maternally deprived children, rocking and other stereotype movements, are common symptoms observed in institutionalized children all over the world. Some children who engage in stereotype movement, endlessly repeated, show evidence of brain damage. Stereotypical movements are observed in retarded children as well. All these children have been deprived of normal mothering for one reason or another, and display the same emotional and social impairment and stereotype movements as animals raised in isolation. Some scientists believe that the cerebellum is involved not only with movement, but with social and emotional behavior as well. At the Tulane University Medical School in New Orleans, studies of brain impairment are conducted with monkeys raised in isolation. Dr. Robert Heath has implanted electrodes, which cause no pain, in the brains of these monkeys. The electrodes are connected by wires to electronic equipment which monitors the activity of the cerebellum and other implanted areas, such as the septum. The septum is a principal brain structure associated with emotional behavior and with the experience of both pain and pleasure. Normal brain waves show up on a graph as consistent patterns, while abnormalities produce wide fluctuations, high-voltage electrical discharges, called spiking by scientists. Dr. Heath found such abnormalities in brainwave graphs of human schizophrenics. When the brainwaves of some of Dr. Harlow's old mother-deprived monkeys were measured, they also indicated visible spiking in both the cerebellum and the septum. The mother-deprived infant monkeys seem to have suffered brain impairment of some sort. At the Jewish Hospital and Medical Center of Brooklyn, other motherless monkeys from Dr. Harlow's original experiment are the subjects of brain impairment studies. Dr. A.J. Berman observes the extreme aggressiveness and hypersensitivity to touch of these Harlow monkeys raised in isolation. After the cage barrier is removed, the monkeys stalk each other. The moment they touch, they are driven to a violent attack. Isolation-reared monkeys are frequently observed biting and chewing away at their own limbs, a phenomenon frequently observed in mentally ill humans as well. In a very recent experiment, Dr. Berman operates on the cerebellum of an aggressive Harlow monkey. His question is whether removal of part of a particular area of the cerebellum will modify the aggressive behavior of the monkey without impairing its body control. If so, it may be possible to link some of the adverse effects of a mother-deprived infancy with impairment of a particular area of the brain. Although Dr. Berman's studies are still in progress, operations like these have successfully reduced aggression in some monkeys and made possible human petting and hand feeding, which were impossible before surgery. Brain surgery is an extreme solution to the problem of abnormal behavior. Much more practical is prevention, the positive effects of mothering that may provide insights into the most basic needs of the child. The early Harlow experiments demonstrated that feeding, while necessary to life, was not most important to infant isolated monkeys, who craved body contact more and preferred the close softness of their cloth mothers. In normal development, vision is one natural guarantee of closeness between mother and child. Its importance can be seen in everyday games. Looking, hiding the eyes, and looking again. Endless variations of peekaboo, forever thrilling to new generations of children. When an infant has been born blind, there is a great danger to it in the disruption of normal patterns of mothering. This child has been blind from birth. He is part of a study by Professor Selma Freiberg of the University of Michigan Medical Center. Professor Freiberg is investigating the effects of blindness from birth on early emotional and intellectual development. This child, raised at home, has a warm and active relationship with his parents. He moves confidently. He is eager to learn. His motor skills are good. He is a happy and lively child and shows no blindisms, such as self-absorbed rocking, that are common among institution-raised blind children. In infancy, he was held close and carried about. Extra attention has been paid to this child, but the lack of sight has not permanently impeded his growth. When a baby cannot see, his mother must find special ways to offer affection and stimulation through other senses, sound, touch, and movement. This swinging substitute mother, a bleach bottle covered with furry cloth, was invented for an experiment by Doctors William Mason and Gershon Berkson at the Delta Primate Center in Louisiana. The isolated monkey has known no other mother than this moving surrogate, which rises, falls, and sways in a random way. This isolated monkey has an identical substitute mother, but the mother does not move. At 10 months of age, the monkey raised on a moving mother substitute is given a chance to make close physical contact with a human being. His behavior seems normal. He appears to be curious, bold, and friendly. The monkey raised with a stationary mother behaves in quite a different way. He seems timid, cringing, and apparently unhappy. He appears emotionally disturbed, unsociable, and unresponsive to changes in the environment. Rocking and other abnormal behavior were prevented in the monkey on the swinging surrogate, although some abnormalities did appear, such as thumb sucking and self-biting. The monkey on the stationary surrogate displays the familiar stereotyped rocking movements. Dr. Mason's studies raise questions about the importance of body movement in the mother-child relationship. Certainly among most mammals, body contact, movement, and handling are an important part of mothering. Moving a child is perhaps nowhere a conscious action for the purpose of stimulating an infant's sensory system. It is a byproduct of play, or of the necessity of getting the child from one place to another so a mother can do her daily work. But children everywhere are moved. Even when they are restrained by swaddling clothes or cradle boards, they are carried, bounced, jostled, moved. Movement is part of a child's experience long before birth. He rides comfortably in his mother's womb, gently rocked as she walks and works through her day. Do babies who are deprived of their full share of prenatal rocking develop normally? A significant percentage of prematurely born babies are known to have some brain abnormalities. In some societies, premature babies live in a world of expensive incubators, separated from living activity. At several New York hospitals, Dr. Mary Neal, a nurse, conducted experiments over a 20-month period to see if a specially designed rocking procedure would help prematurely born babies catch up to normal development more quickly. Would they exhibit fewer abnormalities than premature infants who are deprived of motion? Most premature infants spend their days sleeping, rarely waking, rarely crying. For several weeks, the babies were rocked for half-hour periods 3 times a day to make up the time they missed being carried in their mother's wombs. Then, the babies in the experiment were tested to gauge their rate of growth. Did the infant have crawling motions that show the beginning coordination of a left-right sequence, an expression of beginning mobility? Can he raise his head to prevent smothering when he is lying on his stomach? How long does it take him to clear his nose from the mattress? The full-term newborn baby has these abilities, and they are essential for the premature infant as well. How good is the infant's grasp? This indicates his muscle strength and coordination. It is easily measured by the weight he can pull. Premature infants who were not rocked in their incubators displayed less improvement than the rocked infants in such activities as raising their heads, beginning crawling, grasp, and response to visual and sound stimuli. Rocked infants also gained more weight. While this research is investigatory, it does reaffirm the importance of movement, even in the womb. The importance of rocking begins before birth. Children whose infancy is spent without mothering can become seriously retarded. This child is 6.5 months old. He has spent his life since birth in a typical institution. He has not been handled as a baby normally is by its mother. This child is already retarded by several months. He is unable to reach out and grasp a rattle, as a child of his age could normally do. He is unable to hold his head straight or to sit by himself. He has not yet learned to eat from a spoon. Professor Theodor Hellbrugge of the University of Munich has observed that retardation at this early an age can result in lifelong disability. To counter the effects of early deprivation, Professor Hellbrugge and his associates have created a special institution for young children who have been denied normal mothering. This boy spent 6 of his 12 months of life in an institution where he was considered seriously retarded. On Professor Hellbrugge's experimental floor at Lure House, he was given a permanent caretaker who is with him all day long. The caretaker is a loving mother substitute who understands the importance of maintaining intimate contact with the baby, touching, fondling, playing. Under the impact of special attention, this boy, once considered withdrawn and retarded, begins to perk up. The more he is handled, the happier he seems to be. The devastation of a motherless beginning seems to some degree correctable at an early age if special effort is made. This child is making rapid progress toward normal development. The phenomenon of substitute mothers is found among lower animals, too. At the Downstate Medical Center in New York, Dr. Leonard Rosenblum investigates different styles of mothering between 2 types of monkeys. One type, bonnet monkeys, are a relaxed breed, gregarious, even cuddly. They are not likely to waste even an inch of space between them. Close contact and body touch seem to provide security to the bonnet monkeys. Adult females are as interested and affectionate toward all young monkeys in the group as they are toward their own, and mothers readily allow others to fondle and interact with their infants. If the mother of a bonnet infant is lost or removed, the infant is usually immediately adopted by another female. When the mother returns, neither she nor her baby makes any particular fuss over the reunion. Dr. Rosenblum observes a strikingly different approach to mothering among another type, the pigtail monkeys. Pigtails are independent and rather aloof from each other. In the pens, they sit apart and avoid physical contact. Pigtail mothers are jealous and not likely to share their infants or allow another monkey to touch their young. In studies of the effects of mother and infant separation, pigtail mothers are taken from their babies for varying periods. This particular separation was quite brief. Had it lasted longer, the infant most probably would have lapsed into a deep depression. When Dr. Rosenblum allows the pigtail mother to return, the reunion of mother and child is frantic. This intense one-to-one relationship allows for no alternatives. If a bonnet monkey loses its mother, it is adopted. If a pigtail infant loses its mother, it also loses the experience of being mothered. Research into the complexity of the mother and child relationship proceeds around the world with animals and humans. Scientists may never be able to say, this factor is the crucial one. We may learn that different aspects of mothering are important at different stages of development. But some things are becoming clear. Infants require stimulation of all their senses. No sense can be considered of lesser importance. As critical as sight and hearing, as necessary as emotion and social interchange, as undeniable as hunger, is the need to be touched and moved. The baby craves and needs to be rocked.
Great baby boom of the late 1940s and early 50s, the guru of child raising was Dr. Benjamin Spock. It was his advice that millions of parents followed in pursuit of the perfect and well-adjusted child. Happy babies. Well, the baby boomers have grown up now and having a baby boom of their own. But the good words of Dr. Spock may today be a bit outdated.
I have a great deal of respect for Dr. Spock for a lot of different reasons, but there's one aspect of his advice, teaching, and child rearing practices that I really have very, very strong exception to, and that's the one where he says it is all right to let your infant or child cry itself to sleep at night. Why the infant is crying is because it needs touching. It needs companionship, it needs affection, it needs body contact, and that's why it's crying.
Dr. James Prescott is a developmental neuropsychologist. He's done extensive research on how stress affects infants and children.
The insufficient affection, physical affection, this is a major, and might be the major source of emotional stress or distress. I think we all recognize how good we feel when we're touched, held, hugged, and then of course in terms of our sexual relationships. It's the natural system of the body to relax.
According to Dr. Prescott, stress is a direct result of a person's environment. A baby's environment is dependent entirely on the parents. So how can parents relieve stress in their children?
We can slow our pace down so that we pay attention to them. This is one of the biggest things that will calm a baby or a young child, is having a parent who is spinning, who's just come home from work, who's putting away groceries, who's cooking dinner and talking about the taxes, suddenly stop and recognize this baby's crying for a reason.
Suzanne Arms is one of the founders of The Birthplace, a center in Menlo Park, California, where parents can get information on how to be better parents.
Most of the time, what parents really need is just support. A little bit of information and a lot of encouragement that they already have the ability to do it, but they just need support.
A natural instinct for all of us, parents or not, is to pick up a baby, hug and cradle them. That's fine, says Dr. Prescott, but there are other ways in which you can get in touch with your child. For fathers and mothers, infant massage is one way of getting close, but perhaps the most natural for mothers is breastfeeding.
Breastfeed on it's a calm period. We sit down and we just block off everything and just enjoy each other. I began to breastfeed my children because I never thought of anything different. It was just a normal place. It just seemed like the obvious thing to do.
There's just that really special bond and a special kind of love that I have for him that I've never had for anybody else. And I think a lot of it is because I am nursing him.
Many parents think that by giving too much attention, you can spoil a child. Not true, says Dr. Prescott. You can never spoil a child with too much affection. But I wondered, will too much affection cause a child to become too dependent on parents?
No, in fact, it's very interesting. It's just the other way around. The best way of developing a dependent child is not to give them the physical affection and emotional security that goes with that.
Now, what you're saying is if we ignore our newborns from birth, that we could damage them for life?
It's a difficult question to answer, but when we look at the behavior of adults and their early infant and childhood history, we can see the relationship between the lack of this touching, the physical affection, again, the caring of the infant, with violence later in life. For example, here in California, the Carpenter case. Here's a person who committed 12, 13 brutal murders, sexual assaults and mutilation. And his history was that his mother beat him brutally because he was left-handed and she wanted him to write with his right hand. So he developed a very severe stuttering problem, and he was in emotional rages. And this would be translated into sexual rage and violence against women. And we see this very commonly in the history of violent individuals. If you really want peaceful and affectionate individuals, we know how to raise such individuals. And you do this by physical affection and pleasure.
makes a happy baby, Suzanne?
Parents make a happy baby. I have no doubt about it.
A wanted pregnancy, a wanted child. You really can't be very affectionate and nurturing and caring to a child that you don't want.
The heart of the Amazon basin, about as remote as you can get from so-called civilization. But science is turning more and more to this kind of jungle to find out why our kind of jungle is becoming more violent. Anthropologists have defined this, the Bora tribe, as a non-violent society. They live communally, under one big roof. Nobody's wealthy, they're not very religious. The children share in the responsibilities, but no adult gets harsh with them if they get out of line. From the moment of birth right through adolescence, they get nothing but the strongest physical affection. It's this contact, the nursing, the touching, the cuddling, that may be the key to the nonviolent society, not the fact that they're far removed from the horrors of civilization. In our own North American tribe, not only is violence generally on the increase, but recent studies show that violence within the family is much greater than anyone thought. In Canada, 1 killing in every 6 is a family affair. In the United States, nearly 2 million husbands or wives have faced an angry mate wielding a knife or gun or even a 2x4. These are the results from just one night of violence in Detroit. External pressures may trigger violence, but why is the potential there in the first place? Psychologists like Dr. James Prescott look to our childhood for clues, to the amount of loving that we got from our parents.
And what I found was that the cultures which provided high infant physical affection were very low in physical violence as adults.
Dr. Prescott looked at 49 primitive cultures and found that by far the majority were peaceful. He found they treated their children with affectionate tolerance, the same tolerance they showed to adult sexuality. It was a different story in the tribes that were notoriously ferocious. They either treated their kids harshly or their adults because of repressive sexual taboos. Prescott set out to prove the inverse relationship of violence and affection by studying what happens to monkeys who don't get any mothering. He already knew that an orphan monkey would cling to any furry substitute that reminded him of mom. But he was interested in something else that he observed in primitive societies, the amount of movement that went with mothering. In the jungle, the two were almost synonymous. Monkeys, too, needed a mother to swing with, even if it's a surrogate. Prescott's colleagues gave one monkey a substitute mother that moved. The other had a surrogate, too, but it was stationary. The first monkey developed normally. He enjoyed being picked up and caressed. The one with the stationary surrogate didn't. He was withdrawn, would cling to his furry surrogate in fear, and if someone reached to pick him up, his little body went rigid with resistance. When he was put back in his cage, he went into neurotic rocking behavior. What do these experiments tell us? A lot about the craving for physical contact. These children have spent all their lives in institutions where the nursing staff didn't have the time to pick them up very often. Their rocking motion is typical, and the longer they're neglected, the more their behavior pattern begins to resemble the monkeys. They start banging their heads. This craving for movement may give us an insight into abnormal or retarded children. Here we see a little boy who's suffering from DeLange syndrome. It's a form of retardation marked by hyperactivity, failure to talk, a lack of emotion and awareness of the environment, and a distaste for being held. He hits himself repetitively and hides behind his hands. But if he's swung around vigorously, he smiles with pleasure, and his eyes are able to keep a steady focus for an extended period. Tests have shown that all children with DeLange syndrome react the same way to vigorous movement. The monkeys tell us more about the severe effects of infant deprivation. The ones that were reared in isolation just don't behave normally when they're finally given a playmate. They rarely touch, and when they do, the contact surprisingly vicious. Does sensory deprivation affect the brain as well? This is the cerebellum cortex of a monkey brain, the part that registers both movement and touch. Prescott and his colleagues cut away a small layer of cells, the ones they thought hadn't developed. When they'd finished, the monkey began to behave normally. Its aggressive behavior stopped. The experiment was designed to prove that the brain's changed by deprivation of sensory stimulus. It wasn't an operation to cure violence. Can we apply this to humans?
I think one of our best examples of this is child abuse. Studies have shown that parents who batter their children have a history of deprivation of physical affection, the lack of so-called mothering.
We know there are incidents of child abuse like this the world over. Studies now show that most parents who batter their children were usually victims of abuse themselves. I spoke to one man for whom the memory of childhood's a lasting nightmare.
And my father, he never beat a person on the backside. It was always a face, him with a belt. And I would go to school with my face blistered, swollen up, my neck. And there was times I just felt like just hiding. Didn't want to go anywhere.
How often would this sort of thing happen? Once a week or once a month?
Every day. Every day, homework, the first thing you do was the belt was off and I was getting a beating for something. If something went wrong at work, he took it out on me or my mother, either one. 90% of the time it was myself. I wasn't scared of him. There's no way. But I often told him that when I got older, he wouldn't push me anymore because I'd fight back.
Greg took it as long as he could and then set out on his own. But he couldn't forget, and he made the mistake of going home again.
I'm down home for a visit. I figured I'd give it a try. And when I walked into the house, from the kitchen sink to the front room, there was nothing but blood on the floor. So I followed the pool of blood, and in the front room, Mother was on the floor, my father sitting on top of her, punching her in the face. And she had her nose broke, her jaw was broke, her arm was broke. There was 2 or 3 cracked ribs. And I grabbed him by the hair, and I drug him outside, and I started to beat on him. And I wouldn't stop. I used my fists, my feet. I used a 2x4 on him. I used a lead pipe on him. And somebody called the police. The police came. And they took me off top of my father. And I was charged with attempted murder.
Greg got 6 years for attempted murder. He served his time, and he's now living in Toronto. But he's worried and determined to keep himself under control. He joined Parents Anonymous, an organization set up to help parents who abuse their children, because he knows better than anyone else the kind of touching a child gets affects its development. Prescott claims it's our Judeo-Christian tradition that's responsible. Mortification of the flesh is good for us. Pain and punishment build character. Touching for physical pleasure is wrong. And that's the root of our distorted attitude to sex.
We have legal authorities taking action against pornographic films, against massage parlors. It's right out of Corinthians. In contrast, we have a whole variety of films of sexual violence, and that isn't even touched. So we have Clockwork Orange, Straw Dogs. We have many films of sexual violence, particularly rape, which can run in our neighborhood theaters, and there is no objection by the authorities for this kind of sexual violence. So it's not sexuality that is the issue. The issue is pleasure. Pleasure is immoral.
But in our society, punishment is not. According to the latest figures, we've now got more than 22,000 people behind bars, and we know what happens.
Our prison system couldn't be designed better to make the problems worse, because it's isolation, it's deprivation. We're doing all those things which in fact contributed to the problem in the first place.
Well, what would you do?
Well, I would put them into an institution which is secure so that the community is safe, and provide ways and means of retraining, re-educating their sensory system to experience pleasure. Now, this is not the only sort of line of therapy, but I would, use whirlpool baths. I would use massage, physical affection, physical pleasure, sexuality. It would be a difficult program to implement, as you know. I mean, we're closing down massage parlors in our cities with nonviolent individuals.
Our society frowns on physical pleasure even for its law-abiding citizens, let alone the ones we put behind bars. Imagine the public outcry for any government that dared supply swimming pools and saunas for its prisoners instead of cells like this. It would be political disaster. But considering the success rate of conventional rehabilitation measures, maybe it's worth taking the risk. Or maybe it's too late for us. But what about our children? Will they miss out too?
As we treat the babies will treat the world. And this is a great truth. We're kidding ourselves that if we just wish for civilization, it's not going to come to pass. What it's going to take are very refined, wise people, disposed to cooperation, to acceptance of the whole human family as valid, and all people as part of this valid family. Or we won't have a civilized society. We won't be civil to one another. Somehow we think that 1,000 Walmarts in China will make them more civilized. We can't get there that way. We need people who come out of the womb smiling. And we're not getting that. In our country especially, with obstetrical approach, we have babies coming out of the womb kicking and screaming and protesting as loudly as their little lungs can do it. And we're not paying attention. The smiling babies have a chance of creating a smiling society, a happy society, a tolerant society, a loving society, a cooperative society. Then we may be talking about civilization. But what if only 1 out of 1,000 comes out smiling? What is that going to result in our civilization? I think it's time we woke up about the realities of birth in our time.